Dawn lifts like a curtain over the Sea of Galilee. The water is pewter, the air damp with a hush of spent effort. Peter and the crew drift near shore hands. Raw eyes, sandy boats, nearly empty after a night that gave them nothing. Nets slump in tired heaps, smelling of rope and lake and disappointment. A crowd gathers on the strand, hungry for words before breakfast. The teacher steps down the slope, light catching the edges of his hair, and asks for something small and ordinary. "May I use your boat?" It's not a miracle, it's a favor. Peter nods. Therefore, the boat that just failed at fishing becomes a pulpit for truth. He shoves off a little anchors by habit and listens while rinsing grit from a net. He's not sure he believes in anymore. The voice over the water is steady clear, as bell metal gentle as oiled wood. It threads through wind riffles and into old places in Peter he doesn't visit often. He doesn't catch every phrase. He catches the tone, the authority that feels like a plumb line dropped through his chest. The crowd drinks it in. Peter pretends to be busy with knots, but there's a tremor under his ribs that isn't fatigue. Teaching ends. Now comes the ask that makes no sense. Go out where it's deeper. Let down your nets for a catch. Peter's laugh is a small, tired exhale. He knows the lake. He knows the hours when fish move, and this isn't one. Therefore, the smart play is to shrug, call it sleep. But something in the teacher's eyes knocks loose a more dangerous word than no, nevertheless. Because you say so. That's not doctrine. That's obedience with wet shoes. They row out. The lake opens like a door left ajar. Nets tumble white across gray and slip under. For a breath, nothing. Then a jolt like the lake itself catching fire. The ropes jump in Peter's hands. Weight surges. The net bulges, groans, screams at the knots. Fish pour into the mesh as if they've been waiting all night for this one voice. Therefore, Peter shouts for partners. Boats thump side by side. Men scramble and laugh and swear the kind of holy swear you say when the world tilts in your favor so hard you get scared. The gunwales sink low. Water kisses the lip of the planks. Scales glitter like thrown coins in a temple court. And in the riot of success, a darker realization breaks the surface. This is not about fish. Power is here, raw, precise kind. But where power and love meet pretense, dies. Peter's knees find the deck. Words stumble out not as a compliment, but a confession. I'm not the kind of man you think I am. Shame surges the quick inventory of the last 24 hours, the jokes, the shortcuts, the small invisible selfishness that never made a splash until someone holy stepped into his boat. Therefore, he expects distance, a polite thank you. Maybe a nod that says, "You're right. I'll find a better candidate upriver." But the teacher doesn't back away. He steps closer over flopping silver and says, the one thing that reframes failure without denying it. Do not be afraid. Fear not dirt is the real weight in Peter's net. Fear of being seen and found thin. Fear of being asked for more than he can carry. Fear that the best moments always happen to someone else. The words land like a hand on a shoulder, steady, warm, unhurried. From now on, you will fish for people, not escape from your craft transformation of it, not throw away your skills, redeem them. Therefore, the same instincts that knew where schools of fish hid will learn the tides of the human heart. They drag the boats ashore, wood-creaking nets, steaming hearts louder than gulls. The haul is ridiculous. The decision is more ridiculous. They leave it. Who walks away from a payday like that? People who've been caught themselves. Peter looks back once at the mound of silver life twitching in the morning, and then forward at the man who turned failure into a doorway. But this is not, and then Peter became perfect. This is the first step in a long road where zeal outruns wisdom, where courage will later buckle by a fire, where tears will salt the ground. Still today, the first move is yes. Frame break your turn. Maybe your boat is a cubicle, your net a spreadsheet, your night a run of small losses nobody claps for. The invitation often hides inside a simple request. Can I sit in your ordinary? Can your tool become my pulpit for a few minutes? Therefore, the miracle may not come before obedience. It may arrive exactly because you pushed off a little from the shore. Peter shoulders a coil of rope like a man changing uniforms. The crowd breaks into eddies of chatter behind them. Sunlight climbs the hills, and a fisherman still smelling of lake and doubt follows a voice onto land toward a future where his hands will still be rough, but his work will be souls, not scales. Start with the small yes. Offer your ordinary. Let obedience move first. Understanding can catch up. The road north to Caesarea Philippi runs under cliffs that look like frozen waves. Shrines dot the rock, little mouths that promise 100 kinds of safety. Jesus slows the pace and tosses a question that feels casual until it lands. Who do people say I am? Answers. Fly like sparrows, prophet teacher. Comeback story from another age. Then he turns the blade and you. Peter's chest answers before his head can get in the way. You are the long-promised king. Not a category, the one. For once, it isn't bravado. It's clarity. The air seems to brighten around him. Jesus affirms what just burst out. This insight wasn't dug up by cleverness. It was given. Therefore, Peter's future opens like a door on a hinge. There will be responsibility keys, a part to play in what God is building. He glances at the others, half stunned, half relieved, like a kid finally saying the right thing in a class where he mostly guesses. Then, the whiplash. Jesus starts explaining that the story ahead runs through rejection, suffering, death, and a sunrise no one will believe. Peter hears the words, but not the music. He pulls Jesus aside like a friend who wants to protect a brand. Don't talk like that. You're upsetting morale. This is not the path. Therefore, Jesus turns and answers with a severity Peter has never seen. The tone is surgical, not spiteful. You're thinking like everybody else. You're trying to save a plan I didn't come to execute. The correction cuts. Peter's instincts be strong. Avoid pain, keep the win streak stand exposed as a rival script to love. He spends the next days, quiet, reeling. If the king's road runs through loss, what does winning even mean? The teacher takes Peter, James, and John up a high mountain, the kind that makes your legs burn and your thoughts clear. While they catch their breath, light catches them. Not sunlight, someone light. Jesus' ordinary humanity thins like a veil, and a radiance long hinted at pours through. Ancient figures appear in conversation with him, the storylines of law and prophets, converging like rivers at a delta. Peter does what Peter does when holiness terrifies him. He tries to organize the moment. Tense. A plan. Something to manage this unmanageable beauty. A voice, not thunder, but something deeper wraps the ridge. This is my son. Listen to him. The instruction is blessedly simple. Not fix for him. Not argue with him when the road bends. Listen. They face plant, hearts pounding. Then Jesus is touching them, ordinary touch after unearthly glory, telling them not to be afraid. The light settles back into skin and sandals. They walk down the mountain with a secret sizzling in their bones and orders to keep quiet for now. Therefore, Peter's pride is humbled into teachability. The earlier rebuke is still tender, but now it sits beside a vision of splendor no suffering can cancel. Both truths live together without canceling each other, the cross and the crown, the cost and the joy. The path isn't a detour. The pain won't be the point. Love is. Peter will later write about this day, how they weren't following myths, they had seen majesty up close. But right now, he mostly carries a new rhythm. Boldness, yoked to listening, zeal, leashed to surrender. Frame break, where do you flinch when God's plan refuses your shortcuts? Maybe you want influence without the hidden labor clarity, without the wrestling applause, without the cross. Peter's lesson here is not never speak up. It's let revelation lead your reaction. When he named Jesus rightly, a door opened. When he tried to steer Jesus away from loss, it almost shut. On the mountain listening, reopened it wider than before. They reached the valley where real life always waits, needs noise, arguments. A boy in trouble, a father out of faith. The vision was not an escape, it was equipment. The rebuke was not rejection, it was alignment. Therefore the man who once rushed to manage moments learned slowly that the holiest work may be less about grabbing the wheel and more about hearing the voice and walking the hard, luminous road it names. Let revelation set the route, and let surrender set the speed. When God's path bends toward cost, listen before you lead. Night lays a dark skin over the lake. The boat noses into waves like a tired animal, wood-groaning sail, snapping salt spray, needling cheeks awake. The wind is contrary, the kind that turns progress into punishment. Hours grind down. The men row, the lake laughs. Peter tastes rope on his tongue, feels the oar bite his palm, and keeps scanning the black for a shoreline that refuses to arrive. Somewhere between exhausted and done, a shape walks the chop. Not skims, walks. The mind throws up explanations, fog ghost stress, but the shape keeps coming step after step, as if gravity signed a non-disclosure agreement. Fear spikes hot. Throats burn with a shout, none of them planned. Then a voice, the one that once steadied a boat with a story and filled a net with impossibility, rides the wind. Take courage. It's me. Do not be afraid. Peter's heart leans before his body does. If it's you, call me. If you are where the impossible is normal, then call me into that normal. Come. It's one word, but it slices a door into the night. Peter swings a leg over the gunwale and discovers that water can feel as firm as command. The first step is not pretty. Knees unlock late, balance wobbles. But the second step holds. Therefore he walks into the teeth of the storm, toward the voice that redefines what water is for. The wind is a choir. The waves are percussion. Somewhere a laugh starts in Peter's chest, the wild joy you feel when you don't deserve any of this, and you're doing it anyway. Then awareness widens. He sees what he's standing on. He hears how loud the wind is. He calculates the angle of the next wave and the odds of being swallowed whole. Therefore the soft focus of trust sharpens into survival math, and the surface beneath him remembers it is water. Ankles sink, knees vanish. Cold climbs like a living thing. Lord, save me. It's not elegant. It's barely a sentence, but it is aimed correctly. The hand is immediate. Not after a lesson, not after a lecture. Immediate. Fingers close around forearms, sinew to sinew, and Peter is yanked back into air. They stand together, spray haloing their faces, storm still saying its piece. You of little faith, why did you doubt? The words aren't a slap, they're a diagnosis. Little faith did not keep him in the boat. It carried him 2, 3, 4 steps farther than reason allows. Doubt didn't disqualify him. It just sank him when he stared at the wrong thing. Together they climb in. The wind folds like a tent taken down. Silence drops heavy and holy. The others breathe the kind of breath men take when death changed its mind. Therefore worship arrives not orchestrated, but unavoidable. Truly, you are the Son of God. Peter wrings his cloak out, a heart hammering in his throat, and files away a truth that will matter on nights more dangerous than this. Courage isn't a mood you hold. It's a motion you make toward a voice. Faith is not the absence of sinking. It's the habit of reaching faster. The storm does not get the last word. The hand does. Frame break your impossible may not look like a lake. It may look like an apology. You've postponed a resume. You're scared to send a habit that talks like a captor. The call is the same. Come, step where the instruction is sturdier than the element. Scan less for worst-case waves and more for the hand that has a history with you. If you sink, and some nights you will aim your words well and early, Lord, save me. He is very good at immediate. Courage is a step toward a trusted voice. When you sink, shorten the distance between failure and Lord, save me. Olives shine like wet coins under moonlight. The garden isn't quiet. Crickets stitch the dark branches, whisper. But everything feels held breath. Jesus asks for prayer the way a drowning man asks for rope. Stay near. Stay awake. Peter nods hard. He means it. Therefore, he picks a spot close enough to hear footsteps, far enough to give space, and promises his eyes won't shut. They do. Weariness is treacherous because it feels like relief. Lids sandbag. Thoughts puddle. Peter jerks awake to the sound of someone praying, with a kind of weight he can't carry, then dozes again. But the third time he startles, it's not prayer he hears, it's metal. Torches move like a river of fireflies with an agenda winding up the path. Lantern light slaps the trees. Boots chew the earth. Temple guards form a black spine behind a familiar face. The signal is small and intimate, the kind of gesture friends use. Therefore, the moment breaks like glass. Peter stands too fast. The bodyguard self-flexing for a fight, his soul isn't ready to win. He promised courage. He reaches for steel. Adrenaline cloaks as obedience. A blade flashes a cry, splits the olive hush, and there's blood where there used to be listening. For a heartbeat, he feels useful, decisive at last, the protector he always wanted to be. But Jesus moves faster than violence can spread. He reaches, restores, rebukes, not with humiliation, but with the authority of someone who could summon legions and chooses not to. Put it away. This is not that kind of kingdom. Therefore, Peter's courage turns to confusion. If power is real and love is real, why is surrender winning? The question has teeth. Jesus steps forward, not back, meeting the torches without flinching, naming the hour, consenting to walk into the gears that grind prophets. The cords touch his wrists, but the choice was made before the soldiers arrived. He hands himself over the way a shepherd lays himself across a gap in a fence, not as defeat as protection. The guards think they're steering. They're not. Love is. The friends scatter like quail when brush explodes. The human body knows how to run before the heart has voted. Peter's legs lunge toward the dark, then hesitate. He can't leave. He can't stay. He does the next worst thing. He follows at a distance close enough to feel the heat of risk, far enough to deny he's there. Torchlight ropes across trunks and faces. The garden empties into a file of men and the echo of orders. Somewhere behind them, an ear lies in leaves, blood drying where mercy touched it, and Peter keeps to the hedges, rehearsing 100 speeches he will not deliver. Frame break. Have you ever mistaken adrenaline for obedience? We swing first because swinging is simpler than staying awake to pray. We confuse loud loyalty with surrendered love. Peter's sword cut a man. Jesus' surrender will cut sin. One wound was theater, the other will be surgery. Therefore, the garden becomes a mirror. When you feel cornered, do you grab control or grab hold of God? They leave the orchard for the city's clenched fist. Gates swallow the column. Peter slips through shadows, breath hitching. The night tastes like metal and rain. His promise to die rather than deny is still warm in his mouth. A rooster somewhere clears its throat into the dark. He grips the hilt at his side and finds to his surprise that it weighs nothing now. By the time he reaches the courtyard, steel won't help him. Only truth will, and it will be the hardest thing he's ever tried to hold. Adrenaline feels like courage, but obedience looks like surrender under control. Pray awake before you act brave. The city holds its breath around midnight. Peter threads streets he knows by market daylight, but not by fear. The column turns through a gate. He slips into the wake and finds himself outside the high priest's house, where justice pretends to stay up late. Courtyards are for warmth and whispers. A charcoal fire hisses in a brass pan, orange light licking stone. The smell smoke metal damp wool will brand this night into his bones. He chooses the edge of the circle where light turns to shadow and men's faces become guesses. Servants trade news like cards. Someone laughs, someone spits. Peter keeps his hood up and his voice down, telling himself proximity is courage. He can't get inside to speak. Maybe he can at least stay nearby. Then eyes land on him, young, sharp, the kind that memorize faces for sport. You were with the Galilean, weren't you? The words are simple. The insinuation isn't. He feels the circle's attention tilt like a bowl of water. Heat crawls his neck. Instincts pick the safest syllables in the world. Not me. The first denial is small, almost polite, more deflection than defiance. He tells himself it's strategy, not betrayal. He moves closer to the gate, farther from the fire, as if distance can cool a conscience. Time limps. Through an inner door he hears voices rising, questions, accusations, a thud of furniture, the rustle of a crowd trying to sound like a court. A rooster in the distance mistakes the hour and crows once a glitch in the dark. Peter flinches, then shakes it off. Superstition is for days when you're not trying to survive. Another servant studies his profile, then his posture. You're one of them. It's the accent Peter realizes, the North Country vowels that turn city ears. He squeezes his Galilee into something flatter, denies again louder, a hand cutting the air as if swatting a fly. Eyes narrow. A man across the fire leans forward as if smelling a story. Peter's heart starts throwing itself at the inside of his ribs. The charcoal pops. The pan spits. Somewhere a log sighs into coals. Minutes stretch like boiled leather. He tries to stand somewhere that is nowhere between loyalty and safety, between confession and performance. Voices pour through the inner door again, a swell that sounds like victory to people who like their verdicts tidy. The firelight catches the edge of a blade. A guard adjusts a helmet. Somebody tells a joke about prophets. Peter finds himself laughing too hard, too alone, hoping noise will hide him. It does the opposite. A relative of the man whose ear met Peter's sword midnight ago steps near. Recognition crawls his face. Didn't I see you in the garden? It's not a question. It's a match lifted to oil. The circle tightens. The accent returns now, uncontrollable. Peter feels the trap close and chooses the last tool the scared use. He swears. Not at God, but by God, invoking weight to prop up a hollow claim. I don't know the man. The sentence lands like a hammer on thin ice. The second rooster call cleaves the night cleanly in two, before it and after it. And with it a sound from the inner room like furniture of the world. Sliding the teacher being led through a corridor. He turns. In the doorway light, their eyes meet, no words, only a look that carries a library sorrow. Without shame, knowledge, without contempt, love that doesn't blink. It is not I told you so. It is I told you, and I chose you anyway. The look is a door to either run farther or return from the farthest place. Tears punch through before he knows he's moving. Feet blur alleys. Stone blurs underfoot. The city's cold air scrapes his lungs raw. He stumbles to a wall and folds down the way a tent collapses when the center pole fails. There aren't words, only gasps emptied of bravado. He had promised to die before he'd deny. He discovers death would have been easier. This kind of failure lives on. It breathes and follows and sits beside you tomorrow. The night hears him weep and does not answer back. Then a quieter thing happens, the first honest prayer of some lives, a surrender. No audience hears. He doesn't bargain, he can't. He doesn't excuse there is none. He lets the truth be heavy and lets it have him. Therefore, the story does not end in a courtyard. Love isn't finished, even when your courage is. A sentence from a future day will come back to him like a rope thrown to a drowning man. Tell the disciples and Peter. But for now, he is only a man in the dark with salt on his face, learning that Christ's look can break you open without breaking you apart. Frame break. Have you ever promised a version of yourself you couldn't deliver? The interview you blew. The vow you snapped. The moment you were sure you'd be brave and weren't. Shame names us with permanent ink if we let it. But notice the look. Not disgust, not dismissal. Recognition and mercy paired. When you hear your rooster, a calendar reminder, a consequence, a memory don't hide in the alley forever. Let tears do the work that denial cannot. Let truth be heavy and have you. Then listen for your name again. Shame wants to finish your story at the scene of your worst moment. Jesus won't. Let his look define you more than your denial. Morning breaks on a city that didn't sleep. Trials stitched through the dark now harden into a sentence the crowds can chant. Wood is hoisted, streets split to let sorrow pass. Peter is not at the front of the procession. He ghosts the alleys trying to keep the shape of his friend in sight without adding his face to the list. Nails ring like hammers trying to fix a broken sky. The hill blooms with crosses. Words are thrown like stones from below. From above, mercy answers with silence that sounds like prayer. The sun sours, the earth flinches. When it is finished, the world feels unstitched. He doesn't stand with the women at the foot. Shame won't let him. He watches from a distance that isn't just physical. The body is taken down with careful hands, linen spices, a borrowed tomb. A round stone leans into its groove and settles like a verdict. Soldiers post up. Seals are pressed. Peter goes nowhere in particular and ends up exactly there, the room where fear bolts the door. Night falls again longer this time, and the air tastes like regret. The day that follows is a Sabbath in name only. Rest refuses men who cannot forgive themselves. Peter counts failures like beads, 1 denial, 2, 3. Then the look, always the look. He tries to pray and can only replay. When morning whispers to the city again, he doesn't expect anything except more of the same. But the women do. They carry what love always carries. After a funeral, what they can. Spices cloth time. They move through gray streets to gray rock and find something their vocabulary does not cover. Guards gone. Stone rolled. Space where a body should be and isn't. A messenger in brightness that looks like lightning arranged into a person. Speaks words that will be told for centuries without wearing out. He's not here. He's risen. Then a line tailored like a suit tell the disciples and Peter. 2 words reach the locked room faster than footsteps. Not a headline, a homing beacon. Peter's name arrives like a rope through a window. And Peter, not the brave ones, not the faithful, the one who folded. The one who swore he didn't know the man whose look still holds him together. Mercy doesn't generalize, it addresses. He runs. Regret is heavy, but hope moves heavier things. John outruns him. Youth often does. Peter arrives and doesn't stop at the threshold. He goes in. Linen lies like an empty cocoon. The headcloth is folded with the strange calm of a God who is not in a hurry anymore. Absence is its own kind of presence here. The room is quiet as a held breath. Therefore Peter leaves with a mind louder than the city chasing the shape of a possibility doors that death can close, love can open. Stories cluster around the day, like sparrows' appearances, meals' hearts, set on fire during a walk, but one thread pulls Peter north back to the place where nets first broke and identity shifted. The angel's addendum wasn't a nicety, it was a summons. He's wanted back not as a spectator to a miracle, but as a man to be remade. The road to Galilee smells like spring damp earth, new grass. Second chances. He goes. Not fixed, not sure, just called. Shame rides along quieter than before. At the shoreline ahead, a charcoal fire will smoke, and a familiar voice will ask a question 3 times until scar tissue turns to skin. But before restoration comes breakfast, and before breakfast came this. A cross that ended one story, a grave that started another, and an angel who knew a name that grief had tried to erase. Frame break grace rarely arrives as a theory. It shows up with your name on it. When you think you disqualified yourself, watch for the rope through the window. A message, a text, a verse, a knock. Don't tidy your record first. Run. Look into the empty and let absence preach what defeated you doesn't hold him, and it doesn't have to hold you. Mercy is personal. When grace calls your name, don't argue with your failure, answer the invitation, and move toward the risen one. Galilee is a rumor of blue before sunrise. Peter does what men do when their souls are tangled. He goes back to something his hands understand. I'm going fishing, he says, like a period. The others climb in. Oars dip, oars lift. Nets arc like tired wings. The lake gives them nothing, as if it too refuses to cooperate with life before all this. Night thins. A figure stands on shore, a silhouette cut from light. Friends, have you caught any fish? It's the oldest question in a working town. How's the haul? Nothing. The voice carries a smile they can hear. Cast on the right side. Every fisherman has a superstition. This one sounds like déjà vu. They throw. The net jerks as if a fist grabbed it from below. Weight explodes into the mesh. Therefore, John's memory ignites. It's the Lord. Peter doesn't wait for consensus. He grabs his cloak, jumps, and churns water toward the only person whose presence makes failures feel less permanent. The boat grinds into sand behind him. On shore, the scene is small and domestic. A charcoal fire, bread and fish already laid out by hands that once stretched wide on wood and now tear breakfast for friends. The smell hits Peter like a door opening into an old room he wishes was locked. Charcoal. The courtyard. The denials. Fire has a memory. Jesus does not flinch from that memory. He recreates it not to shame Peter, but to redeem the air itself. They eat salt and smoke in quiet. The post-resurrection world is loud with miracles, but this moment is a whisper with chairs pulled close. After breakfast, Jesus turns to Peter with a question that sounds simple and weighs a ton. Do you love me more than these? Not a trap, an invitation. Peter nods into words. You know I love you. Therefore, Jesus hands him work, feed my lambs. Love in this kingdom isn't proven by volume or vows. It grows legs and learns people. Again. Do you love me? The second question slides under bravado to reach scar tissue. Peter answers again, a little hoarse. You know I love you. Shepherd my sheep. Leadership here isn't a stage, it's a pasture. It smells like mud and illness and wanderers who need someone who remembers what it's like to fail and be found. Again, the third time lands where the third denial once did. It stings. Old nights flood the edges of Peter's sight. Do you love me? He doesn't reach for promises. He reaches for relationship. Lord, you know all things. You know I love you. He throws the truth of himself at the truth of Jesus and waits. Therefore, Jesus does not cancel him. He commissions him. Feed my sheep. The symmetry is not math, it's medicine. 3 wounds, 3 questions, 3 callings. The charcoal has a new association now, not cowardice care. Then a sober word about cost. When you were younger, you dressed yourself and went where you wanted. When you are older, you'll stretch out your hands and be led where you do not want to go. It isn't a curse, it's clarity. Love will take you farther than fear ever did, and it will take you into places fear never would. Peter glances at John, the friend, the witness, and tries what we all try when anxiety rises: comparison. What about him? Jesus smiles, something like a wince. If I want a different road for him, what is that to you? You follow me. Therefore the new rhythm of Peter's life is not prove yourself, but pasture my people. Not earn your way back, but walk with me forward. His hands skilled at knots will learn to untangle people. His voice once loud with promises will learn the slower volume of care. He will still stumble, he will still learn, but shame is no longer the driver, love is. Frame break. How does Jesus restore people today? Not by pretending the courtyard never happened, but by setting a table near the scene and asking a better question. Not, will you never fail again, but will you love me now and love the people I love? Your charcoal smell might be an inbox, a hospital hallway, a ruined conversation. Don't avoid it forever. Let him meet you there. Answer honestly. Then translate love into feeding a call, returned a meal, dropped off a hard truth told gently. A policy changed for the sake of people. They walk the shoreline, footprints, pairing and crossing gulls, inscribing cursive above them. The water combs itself into lines of light. Behind them, the fire dies to orange memory. Ahead of them, a city waits, a sermon waits, a community waits, to be taught how to share bread and burdens. Peter will never hear a rooster the same way again. He will never smell charcoal as only failure. The sound is now a bell. The scent is now a sacrament. Follow me, Jesus had said when nets were full the first time. Follow me. He says again now that hearts are being refilled. It is enough. Jesus doesn't erase your worst night. He meets you there and gives you people to love. Answer the question, then feed the sheep within your reach. Jerusalem wakes to festival noise. Pilgrims like bright threads woven through stone alleys, languages tumbling over fruit stalls and prayer songs. Peter and the others are upstairs, doors latched more from habit than terror now. Waiting is work you can't photograph. They pray, they rehearse promises, they glance at the sky as if wind has an appointment. It does. The room inhales a sound that doesn't fit inside Rush-Roar River, like the breath that hovered over chaos on page 1, returning to make a new world out of frightened men. Heat without burn appears above. Each head tongues of fire, not to scorch, but to signal. Not one flame for the gifted few, a flame for each. Presence personal enough to part and rest and claim. The space that was too small for their courage becomes a launch pad. Words erupt first. Languages they never studied bloom on their tongues like flowers opening in fast motion. The sound spills out the windows and into streets where skeptics and seekers tilt their heads the same way. We hear them declaring God's wonders in our own languages. Therefore, a crowd gathers 1,000 accents craning toward an upstairs story. Some cry, some calculate, some sneer in the universal dialect of dismissal. They're drunk. Peter could duck. It would be reasonable. Recent memory says your mouth is a liability. But love has been stitching him back together since breakfast by charcoal, and the Spirit ties the final knot. He stands where he used to sink. He clears a throat that once cursed and now feels like an instrument waiting for a note. Listen. He doesn't defend himself. He explains God. The prophet's old promise gets new oxygen. This is that Spirit poured on sons and daughters, old men dreaming young men, seeing servants of every stripe speaking God's speech. He tells the Jesus story in a city that thinks it already knows. It mighty works, you saw a cross, you witnessed a resurrection God accomplished. He dares to say you without venom, the kind of you that invites repentance rather than demands ruin. Therefore hearts cut, not as an enemy's blade, but as a surgeon's. What should we do? It's the question every good sermon hopes for and can't manufacture. Repent. Be baptized. This promise is for you and your children and for all who are far off. The far-off part lands on Peter like a seed that will sprout later on a rooftop in Joppa. But for today, it means the door is wide. They step through it in droves. Water splashes like rain on stone. Names are learned. Bread is broken. Purses are opened. A community forms in the aftermath of a message. Like a village springs up around a well, Peter watches the math of mercy outpace his expectations, 3,000 in a day, and more in the days after, not fans but family. Therefore, leadership shifts shape. It moves from speeches to systems, from platforms to tables. The apostles devote themselves to teaching prayer and a new administrative genius called love distributing. Fairly listening to complaints before they harden into factions, raising up servants who can carry both bread baskets and wisdom. Signs continue. Fear and favor mingle in the streets. The city learns to point to a people and whisper, "They don't hoard. They don't lie. They sing when they suffer. They share like it's a sport." Peter goes home at night, not to roosters or charcoal, but to the slow, relentless burn of a calling that will not let him shrink back to a boat. He sleeps lighter, not from anxiety, but from readiness. If the Spirit moves at 9 a.m. or midnight, he wants to be interruptible. The man of impulse is becoming a man of formed courage speech, as a gift, silence as a tool power, as service. Frame break. How do you know the Spirit is moving? Not just goosebumps. Watch for courage that serves clarity, that comforts conviction, that doesn't humiliate generosity, that feels like common sense. And when cynics shrug, don't spend your sermon arguing with mockery. Tell the story. Point to the promise. Invite the "what should we do?" Then give people a next right step and stay to help them take it. The Spirit doesn't make us loud. He makes us clear. Stand up. Tell the story, open the door, and then build the table where new family can eat. Morning light spills down the temple steps like water over stone. Beggars stake their corners. Merchants tune their pitches. Priests move with practiced grace. At the beautiful gate sits a man whose legs have been a lifelong rumor there, but never useful. Friends carry him daily and set him where generosity might notice. He doesn't ask for hope. He asks for coin. Peter and John climb the steps with prayer in their pockets and yesterday's fire still warm in their bones. Look at us. The man does expecting copper. Peter's hands carry no purse, but they carry something weightier. Silver and gold I do not have, but what I have, I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, walk. Therefore Peter reaches not with theory, but with touch and hauls a life to its feet. Ankles that always buckled lock. Bones that had memorized collapse learn lift. The man doesn't test walk. He explodes. He's leaping, laughing, clinging the temple's careful silence shredded by a joy that refuses indoor voice. Crowds surge like a tide around the colonnade. Everyone knows this man. Therefore everyone knows this isn't hype. Peter refuses celebrity with the same stubbornness he once used to defend himself. Why stare at us as if our power or piety made this happen? The God of Abraham has glorified his servant Jesus. He tells the story again how they handed over the author of life and how God wrote him back into the world. Repent so that times of refreshing may come. The word refreshing rolls over the courtyard like shade at noon. The temple authorities do not clap. Wonder they can handle. Surrender they cannot. Security moves in. Peter and John spend the night in a cell that smells like old iron and new fear trying to rehearse its lines in their heads. Morning brings a semicircle of power rulers, elders, scholars, whose eyes weigh. By what power or name did you do this? It is the question of the age, and Peter answers with the calm of a man who has already drowned and been pulled out. By the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, whom you crucified, whom God raised. He does not hurl the words like stones. He places them like evidence. Therefore, the council blinks. The courage doesn't match the resume. These are unschooled men, yet someone has finished their sentences for them. They take a sidebar and do what threatened systems do. They try to manage what they will not believe. Speak no more in this name. Peter used to be good at vows made too fast. Now he is good at clarity made slow. Judge for yourselves whether it's right to obey you rather than God. We cannot help speaking about what we have seen and heard. They release them with warnings. And the kind of grit your teeth make when you can't stop a river with a net. Peter and John go to their people, and the church doesn't count votes. It prays. The room shakes not metaphorically, literally, and boldness rises like bread in an oven. Therefore care scales with courage. No one claims possessions as private kingdoms, needs dissolve under a wave of generosity. The healed man keeps walking proof with a pulse that the age to come keeps peeking into this one. Frame break compassion will put you in front of crowds. Clarity will put you in front of councils. Both are classrooms. When God uses your hands to lift someone, refuse the spotlight and tell the story. When power tries to gag your witness, answer without venom and keep serving publicly. The beautiful gate still has a line every morning. Temples called workplaces, sidewalks, comment sections. Carry what you have. Sometimes it will be coin. Often it will be a name. Love heals in public and speaks in pressure. Lift who's in front of you, say Jesus plainly, and build the kind of community where both courage and care can grow. Noon in Joppa presses heat into rooftops. Peter climbs the outside stairs of a tanner's house, air salted with sea edged with the sour of curing hides, and looks for wind. Hunger shows up early. Prayer shows up anyway. He closes his eyes to the glare, and the boundary between waking and vision thins, like parchment held to light. A sheet lowers from the sky by its corners, crowded with creatures that would never share a table hoof and claw scale and wing an argument on legs. A voice he loves tells him to kill and eat. Everything in him trained since childhood says, but that's not how we honor you. The scene rises, falls, repeats 3 times, as if knocking on a locked room inside him. He's still decoding when the bell at the gate rattles. Strangers wait below, uniforms, dusty accents, coastal courtesy coded with urgency. A Roman centurion named Cornelius has seen his own messenger and sent for Peter. Roman. The word has a taste. It tastes like taxes and boots and a crucified friend beneath a government seal. Therefore Peter hesitates. Then the Spirit nudges the decision past his old fences. Go. Don't call unclean what I have made clean. He descends the stairs into a threshold larger than any doorway in Joppa. The road to Caesarea is a classroom. Every step scrapes a rule he once loved for how it protected him from compromise. By the city's gates, a well-kept house waits like an argument for empire colonnades, order money that smells like iron. Cornelius meets Peter in the courtyard with a soldier's posture and a beggar's eyes, and does the awkward thing high-status men do when humility doesn't fit. He falls at Peter's feet. Peter pulls him up fast. Stand. I'm human too. Therefore status is dismissed at the door, and a fisherman walks into a room filled with relatives and friends who've arrived early to hear a story they aren't sure they're allowed to belong to. Peter does not start with law. He starts with learning. You know it's not my habit to walk into homes like this. But God has taught me not to label people I don't understand. Then he tells the news as if it's brand new again. Jesus' life, death, rising, not myth, not niche, not neighborhood specific. He speaks and watches the sentence leave his mouth like seed thrown wide. Everyone who trusts him receives forgiveness. The everyone is the word that rearranges furniture in the room. It rewires Cornelius's face from polite interest to astonished hope. It presses on Peter too, loosening tightened theological muscles. He feels the same wind he knew in the upper room, the same weight without burn. Before he can finish his neat speech, God interrupts with himself. The Spirit falls. Languages burst like spring in foreign soil. Faces light like lanterns. The Jewish believers with Peter stare, then argue with their own eyes. This is our chapter, isn't it? Our feast, our flame. Therefore, Peter refuses to argue with what he can't deny. If God has given them what he gave us at the start, who am I to stand in the doorway? God just tore off its hinges, water is brought, names are spoken. A commander and his household go under, and up dripping a new allegiance. Hospitality flips. Cornelius urges Peter to stay. He does, and the table that would have been off limits yesterday becomes church furniture today. News outruns them to Jerusalem. Concerned friends ask the question that sounds like protection, but can feel like suspicion. Why did you eat with uncircumcised men? Peter doesn't fire back. He tells the story slow. The sheet, the voice, the knock, the house, the wind, the words, the water. He emphasizes not his brilliance, but God's initiative. Therefore, the room shifts from crossed arms to lifted hands. If that's what God is doing, then praise God. The line around the family of faith moves outward. Frame break our unclean labels. Wear modern clothes, industry rival, political. Other the neighbor whose music is a different language. Inclusion isn't the erasure of conviction. It's obedience when conviction expands to match God's mercy. Ask, where am I protecting my comfort while God is pursuing people whose table is He asking me to sit at so I can bring not pressure a person? Peter didn't rewrite scripture. He reread the story in the light of what the author was doing. In Joppa, it was a sheet. In your city, it might be a spreadsheet, a map pin, an unexpected DM. Don't wait for full clarity to take the first hospitable step. Knock, listen. Tell the news like it belongs in their language too. And when God interrupts your tidy categories with an outpouring, you didn't schedule say the sentence Peter learned to say the hard way. Who am I to stand in God's way? Obedience may require widening your circle. When God makes people clean, join him at their table, and let everyone mean everyone. The city learns a new rhythm prayer at dawn bread, broken at noon, whispers at night. But not everyone loves music like this. A king with fragile ego and sharp knives watches the crowds tilt toward these Jesus people and decides to balance the ledger with blood. James falls first, swift trial, swifter blade. Grief hits the church like a wave that knocks the wind out. Between sobs and psalms, there's a knock at Peter's door that isn't a knock. It's an order. Chains. March. Iron breath of a cell. Peter knows this scent. Damp stone sweat, the close rust of a life paused. 4 squads rotate around him like clock hands. Herod wants no mysterious escape story to undercut his headlines. Therefore, Peter does what condemned men do when they've run out of strategies. He sleeps. Not apathy, trust. He has learned that the world is not held up by his worry. Somewhere across town, a house is full of the sound of asking. Names volley back and forth heavenward. Tears slick wood. A lamp gutters. A girl named Rhoda keeps refilling oil and hope. God free him. It's not eloquent, it's urgent. The prayer is a rope they won't let go of, even as the night gets heavy. Deep in the cell, a light that doesn't belong to torches fills the room as cleanly as morning. A messenger stands where a wall used to be a wall. He taps Peter like a friend shakes a shoulder after a long sermon. Up. Chains drop with the finality of keys turning the opposite way. Sandals, cloak, follow. The guards keep dreaming awake. Iron agrees to act like air. Gates open their own mouths. Peter thinks he is still asleep, the good dream men have on bad nights. They pass the first post, the second, and then the great iron jaw that guards the city. It yawns and they walk through. The street breathes. The messenger is gone. The cool dark of Jerusalem at midnight wraps Peter in its ordinary sounds. Dogs, somewhere distant, a cart axle complaining the hush after adrenaline. Awareness lands, this is not a dream. Therefore he heads where the prayers are. He knows the house the way sailors know wind by the back of their necks. He knocks. Inside the church keeps tugging the rope tied to heaven. Rhoda goes to the gate, hears his voice, gasps, and does what delighted people do. She forgets to open the door. She runs to announce the miracle, leaving the miracle in the alley. Peter's at the gate. The room answers the way praying rooms laugh when hope outruns their categories. "You're out of your mind," she insists. They negotiate theology with her, while Peter keeps knocking a saved man stranded on the right side of a door. Finally, the latch lifts. Faces ignite. Hands grab. Shushing fails. Peter motions the room into quiet and tells the story in fragments, light chains, gate breath. He points them to pass it on to James and the brothers, the other James, now rising into leadership. Then he slips into the city's arteries and disappears for a while, not as an escape from calling, but as a way to keep the movement from becoming one man's martyrdom too soon. Morning brings rage to the barracks. Searches, oaths, executions. Herod chews the air and decides the best way to look strong is to shout louder at the ocean. He receives flattery like a sacrament. He plays God and discovers that the job is taken. History will record his end with disturbing detail. But the church will remember that the night the king flexed, heaven whispered and iron forgot how to be iron. Therefore, the community learns two lessons at once. God can open doors, no committee can close, and grief does not disqualify power. They mourn James and thank God for Peter in the same breath, without pretending one offsets the other. Sorrow and joy sit at the same table and pass the bread. Frame break when pressure closes in. Don't measure God's presence by how quiet your pulse is. Pray like the house prayed, specifically stubbornly, together. Expect to be surprised by how ordinary the miraculous can feel. Sandals cloak street a knock, and when your answer shows up, open the door before you argue about whether it's possible. God's rescue often walks in on ordinary feet. Pray together. Sleep in trust, move when the door swings, and leave room for both grief and gratitude at the same table. Years widen. The church spreads like light through door cracks. Peter ages into the kind of presence you feel before you see a voice steady from storms. Survived a patience learned the hard way. He writes to scattered believers. He calls exiles not to flatter them with romance, but to locate them in reality. They are at home in God, while living far from home in the world. The tone is not lecture, it's field manual smudged by use. Fire has come again this time, not on heads, but on households. Slander in the streets, lost jobs, cold shoulders. Some suffer for doing right and feel cheated by that math. Peter will not promise a shortcut. He lifts their chins to a bigger horizon. The tested faith you carry is more durable than gold. Holiness is not a costume, but a new nature. Hope isn't denial, it's direction. Therefore, don't waste the ache. Turn it into hospitality. Turn it into love that refuses to quit. Turn it into a quiet refusal to mirror the contempt that stares at you. He writes to leaders as a fellow elder, not as a celebrity signing books. Shepherd the flock, he says, without saying the way I learned to, not by force, not for fame, but willingly, watchfully, ready to hand out courage and bread. Clothe yourselves with humility, wrap it around you like an apron before you serve. Cast your anxieties on God. He cares with a care that does not dim when the lights go out. Be alert. There is an adversary who roars to scare and scatter. Resist him not with bravado, with steadiness. After you have suffered a little while, the God of all grace will mend what broke and set you on your feet again. This isn't a loophole out of pain. It's a promise that pain isn't architect of your life, grace is. Therefore, everyday holiness gets wonderfully practical. Honor people. Do good to the city that misunderstands you. Work with clean hands. Love your spouse with gentleness that looks like weakness from a distance and strength up close. Keep your speech unweaponized. Bless when cursed, answer when asked, and if they ask why your life still carries light, talk about your hope with calm respect. Suffering may arrive. Panic does not have to. The Lord sets apart ordinary folks and calls them a royal priesthood, not to make them fancy, but to make them useful. Then another letter, shorter, weightier. Peter remembers a mountain where glory woke them from themselves and insists they were not trafficking in myths. He anchors their confidence not only in his memory, but in a lamp that burns in a dark room, the prophetic word confirmed. Pay attention, he says, until the day breaks in you. But he is not naive about the world. False teachers will come greased with charisma, promising freedom while selling chains. They'll use religion as a marketplace and grace as a license. Therefore, discernment becomes love's bodyguard. Grow in knowing Jesus, not just knowing about him. Add to faith the muscles that carry it: goodness, knowledge, self-control, endurance, brotherly affection, love. These are not merit badges. They are a life with weight. He speaks of timing the way an old fisherman reads weather. Scoffers will shrug at delay and call it evidence that nothing is coming. But delay, he says, is mercy, not apathy, time for more prodigals to find the porch. The end isn't a punchline. It is a promise of remade things where unraveled creation is rewoven without rot. Therefore, live today as people who will be at home in that tomorrow, clean-hearted, peace-seeking, unpanicked, anchored. Tradition will later place Peter in Rome under a smoke-dark sky. The era of bonfires that burned human, the rumor that Christians caused the city's grief. We won't sensationalize what we cannot verify. But the witness points this way: when his road narrowed, love held. He remembered a breakfast by charcoal and a sentence about stretching out his hands, and he trusted the one who told it. Whether he wrote his final lines in ink or breath, the message didn't change: stand firm in true grace. He signs with other names to show it's never been about one man. Silvanus Mark, the wider family. A fisherman closes like a pastor: peace to all of you who are in Christ. Therefore, Peter's legacy is not a statue. It's a way to walk eyes up when the street sneers, hands open, when money tempts back straight, when fear roars, feet quick to the table with bread. He began with a net and ended with a flock. He began promising big and failing hard. He ended promising less and loving more. The rock was never his personality. The rock was a person he learned to lean on until he carried others to him. Frame break. What does this part mean right now? If you're tired, borrow Peter's verbs. Bless, resist, cast, hope, shepherd. If headlines shake you, light the small lamp you've been given and keep it trimmed: hospitality, integrity, stubborn joy. If delay makes you cynical, let mercy recalibrate your clock. And if leadership is yours in any sphere, work home church, wear humility like your uniform, and measure success by the health of people, not the height of platforms. Stand firm in grace with humble hands. Suffer without surrendering kindness, lead without loving spotlight, and grow the kind of character that can carry hope into hard rooms. Picture a montage. Not Galilee, but your street. Not a fishing net, but a calendar, a baby monitor, a stack of invoices. There's a Courtyard moment still on replay. An interview you fumbled, a friendship you cracked, a promise you broke to yourself again. Shame does what it always does, narrates you in past tense. Therefore you hide at a distance and call it prudence. But somewhere nearby, the risen Jesus is already building a small fire on an ordinary shore and asking the same old question that rearranges futures: do you love me? Peter's story isn't a museum piece. It's a manual. Love answers honestly, no swagger, just, you know me. Therefore, love becomes movement toward people, not because you've earned a platform, but because you've received a purpose: feed my sheep. Translation for Tuesday: check on the coworker who went quiet. Bring soup to the neighbor who just had surgery. Text your kid an apology and a plan. Ask your team a better question than, where are the numbers? Ask, where are the needs? Maybe you protest, I'm disqualified. I sank. I denied. I'm not the rock. I'm gravel. Good news, gravel still bears weight when grace compacts it. Pay attention to the blueprint Jesus used on Peter. He returned to the scene, told the truth, then gave work proportional to love. He did not say, "Be amazing." He said, "Be available." Therefore, your next right step is small, concrete, and close, someone within arm's reach who needs bread bandwidth or a brave conversation. Don't romanticize shepherding. It's scheduling, showing up, and learning names. Feeding isn't fixing. Peter didn't cure every problem. He carried people to the one who could. The early church lived this out with ridiculous practicality. Shared meals, shared money, shared burdens. They organized care so no widow slipped through a crack. No complaint hardened into a canyon. Therefore, healthy leadership looks less like a lone hero and more like a table team. Deacons, volunteers, quiet saints who turn love into logistics. Start where you are, calendar a recurring check-in. Build a simple fund with friends for emergencies. Keep a spare chair at dinner. And about courage, expect wobble. Peter's boldness wasn't the absence of butterflies. It was obedience with butterflies on board. When you speak about Jesus, drop the performance voice. Tell the story like eyewitnesses do, what you've seen and heard, and how mercy found your name. Therefore, clarity beats volume. If someone asks why you haven't hardened, say, "Because he didn't harden toward me." If someone flings mockery, answer without venom. Your job is invitation, not demolition. Doors open by patience that outlasts posturing. Comparison will try to siphon your joy. What about him? What about her? Jesus, answered Peter with the only cure that works. You follow me. Your lane will have its own weather. Someone else gets applause. You get a long obedience in a small direction. Therefore, measure success by faithfulness, not fireworks. Did I feed who God put in front of me? Did I choose love over image? Did I repent fast when I blew it? These are the quiet metrics of a life heavy with grace. Finally, plan for cost. Shepherds smell like sheep. Love will lead where preference wouldn't. You may be misunderstood. You may carry stories you can't share. You may give without seeing the harvest. Therefore, practice Pentecost habits. Now pray with people, not just for them. Keep your home interruptible. Make your budget merciful. Build rhythms that refill what ministry drains. And when you hear your personal rooster, when old failure tries to rename you, let the smell of charcoal remind you not of collapse, but of commission. Breakfast is on. Work awaits. Jesus is already on the shore. Don't wait to feel worthy. Answer love with movement. Feed the people within reach with clarity, steadiness, and a readiness to be interrupted by grace. The story lands where it began, a shoreline of ordinary days and a voice that still says, "Follow me." If you listen, you can hear two sounds braided through Peter's life like a double helix. One is the rooster that once announced collapse. The other is the charcoal crackle where love rewrote him. The look and the line. The look that didn't condemn. The line that kept him steady. Love first, leads second. He carried that rhythm into rooms hot with controversy and nights loud with chains. When crowds cheered, he remembered tears. When fear pressed, he remembered breakfast. Therefore, he learned to measure success by faithfulness, not by applause. To make decisions with a shepherd's heart, not a performer's hunger. The more he loved Jesus, the more people were safe around him, even when truth cut. That is what grace does when it's believed deeply. It makes us both softer and stronger. Now it's your turn to hear the braid. The rooster isn't your enemy. It's your reminder, wake up to reality and mercy. The charcoal isn't your accusation. It's your table, come eat, then feed. Therefore, let your failures teach tenderness and your restorations teach responsibility. If you need a pocket sentence to walk with, borrow Peter's, "You know I love you." Then translate it into action, feed my sheep. Do the next small faithful thing with a steady hand, a clear word, and a door that opens more than it shuts. When you step into tomorrow's courtyard, A meeting, a kitchen, a classroom carry the look and the line. Look, Christ's gaze that knows you fully and stays. Line, the simple call that sets your route when emotions fog the map. Ask better questions than, am I enough? Ask, what does love require? Who needs feeding? Therefore you will become a kind of rock, too, not unbreakable but reliably placed, so others can find footing in the God who held you. If you'd like a close in prayer, here's one as plain as Peter's toolbox. Lord, you know all things. You know I love you. Show me the sheep within reach. Give me courage to speak and humility to serve. Keep me from the sword of impulse and the silence of shame. Make my life a breakfast table in a cold world. Then rise, rinse the nets of yesterday, and go. Let Christ's look steady you and his line guide you. Love first, lead second today in the next ordinary moment within reach.